Welcome back to Global News Morning. Always a pleasure to have you join us, and always a pleasure for us and hopefully you to check in with our good friend, Mr. Matt Lee. Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Very well, and some important conversation to be had here. Hopefully, a lot of this is common sense, but it is worth repeating. We're talking about fire safety for all
Yeah,
homes and all places where people live. Very important information to pass on here.
it is. For some reason, it stuck out in my mind that watching you guys on the news over the past few weeks, there's been a few reported fires in houses, and you know what? We go back and we start thinking of these things, and you think, let's get the preventative measures out there and try to help. Make sure that things are being checked. We just had this major storm roll through just north of us. So you're going to be dealing with electrical, and there's different pieces that we want to talk about to make sure that everybody's safe and that the investment that you have and the home that you have is protected and it's taken care of.
Well, lots of tips you'll pass on. Again, some of these are common sense, but they do beg worth repeating.
Yeah, absolutely. So home heating systems, we're not going to be using the system itself, but before you turn it back on, you're going to want to make sure that you have it checked. You're going to make sure that you're changing the filters and that you have a licensed technician dealing with your equipment, gas, oil, anything like that. You want to make sure that they're dealing with wood stoves. At this time of year, we see all the bugs that are coming out. They're going to be building nests and potentially doing it in a chimney. So you want to make sure before you do anything with those, you have those checked and make sure that they're okay. Making sure that CO detectors are operating properly in a house. Your windows are open right now, so you're going to have a lot of air movement. But if for any reason the house is closed up because of AC and there's a vehicle turned on in a garage, you want to make sure that the CO detectors are properly installed and that they're being used.
And we'll also talk about electrical systems.
This is going into that storm side of things right now. So basically, we had this storm roll through, and basically, even in Kingston, we had wind, and the wind was high, not as bad as north of us. But what we're dealing with is that if for any reason electrical got frayed or something got pulled, and there's a hot spot, if you think that there is something that doesn't seem to be acting correctly, then maybe have that checked because that wire could get hot if you're using extra pieces right now, say like plug-in air conditioners or different things along that lines that may draw a little bit more electricity, make sure that it's not overheating the system and that if you have a fuse panel, in a 15 amp spot, make sure that there's a 15 amp fuse and that it's not a 30 because then you're trying to overheat it and then that pushes out heat into the line. So you want to make sure that those things are taken care of and then it keeps the house safe as well.
And a cord will become hot if that circuit is overheated.
That's correct. Yeah, if you're using something too much, it will overheat and it could cause fire. So we want to
Home
prevent
escape
that.
planning. Talk it over with the family.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you have little kids in the house, it's always good to know one, first of all, we're going to start with the plan itself. Does everybody know if something happens in the house, how to get out? Where do you have your two different exits that you're going to go out if something were to happen? Does everybody have a plan, that is the adults in the house, to talk to the kids about who's coming to get them, where we should be going so that everybody doesn't scatter and panic. We want to make sure that everybody's safe and that they know how to get out, and then having a meeting place outside so that everybody can be accounted for and that everything's okay. Want to make sure that these things kind of are taken care of, especially with elderly people in the house and young people in the house. We want to make sure that there's a full plan.
And if thick smoke is detected, stay low.
That's right. We had all this. We see these firemen are going back into the schools now, which is great because they're doing the prevention stuff with the kids. But let's get low, get out to an exit, and get out where you can be safe. Windows open, door open, get out and get to a spot where everybody else is.
With the cost of homes going up, the cost of supplies, of building supplies, it is important to check one's insurance policy as well.
Yeah, I think that this is something that we've heard about people running into, and we really want to look at this. If you had an insurance policy that you've had in place for 4 or 5 years, you were at the average house was about 389,000 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And now the average house is up above 600, 650. So the cost of the house went up, but also the cost of material went way up. We've talked about lumber, and we've talked about steel, and we've talked about concrete, and we've talked about these materials. So if your insurance policy was put in place 4 or 5 years ago, it might be a good idea to just pull that policy out, take a look at what your coverage is, and look at the size of your house. So, I would be saying that maybe talking to a contractor that but if you were saying $350 to $400 a square foot, that would be a good ballpark to start with for the cost. If you say that, it's 1,000 square foot house, it's going to be $400,000, that probably makes sense. But you want to check with what the state of the house is. Do you have hardwood floors, marble tile, or do you have laminate? It just depends on the house itself. So it might be a really good idea to pull out that policy to make sure that you're covered if something ever were to happen.
And finally, there's been a recall with Emerson tanks.
So they're a giant tank, and there's an Emerson black box on the side of a tank. So if you look at a gas hot water tank, whether it's propane or it's natural gas, there's a box down at the bottom, and it has lights on it. On the side of that box, there is a barcode. And if the barcode reads off to be this certain number, which we could probably put on the screen, with a date code with it. So there's two pieces to it. There's a barcode, and then there's a date code. And if both of them match, then there's a potential of a carbon monoxide release, in the valve. I actually just got the notice. We actually had that tank. So we had the guys come in and replace it yesterday. So they are here. They do need to be checked. I would go down and check that tank and make sure. So one, that'll make sure your carbon monoxide detector is working. And two, you want to make sure that valve gets changed if it needs to be.
Get in touch with the city. The information is on the screen. Very important. Matt Lee, thank you so much for all your valuable information. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Real Estate Tips, brought to you by Matt Lee of Royal LePage.